You're listening to the Tel Aviv Review here on TLV1. I am Gilad Halpern. Welcome back. I am joined now by Professor Meron Medzini. He's a Japanologist at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, but also, perhaps surprisingly, a biographer of Golda Meir, who was Prime Minister of Israel between 1969 and 1974, and was our very own Iron Lady. Hello, Professor Medzini, and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Thank you.
So tell us, how does a Japanologist get to write a political biography of an Israeli leader?
The Japan part of my life has to do with two people. One is my father, who lived in Japan at the end of World War I, and he used to tell me stories about his year in Yokohama and Kobe. The other one was the first foreign minister, Moshe Sharet, whom I met in New York in 1955. He asked me what I was doing. I told him I'm doing my BA, and he said, I suggest to you that you focus on East Asia, specifically on Japan, because we will need Japanese specialists. So I ended up getting an MA and then PhD in modern Japanese history. When I came back to Israel, I did not go to the foreign ministry. Rather, I did two things. I started teaching at the Hebrew University, modern Japanese history. I was the first teacher there from 1965. And I also joined the Office of the Prime Minister as the director of the Israel Government Press Office in Jerusalem, a position I held from 1962 to 1978 under Prime Ministers Ben-Gurion, Eshkol, Golda Meir, Rabin, first term, and the first few months of Menachem Begin.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you got to know Golda Meir personally?
I met Golda Meir, I suspect, when I was about 2 years old, because she grew up with my mother. Both of them met in PS4 in Milwaukee in 1906. Two little girls, Jewish immigrant girls who barely spoke English, and they became lifelong friends until Golda died in 1978. After she retired, my family and some friends said, you've got a trove of stories, why don't you do a book? Which I did. It took me about 10 years, and I produced a book in Hebrew, which is very long. It's about 750 pages. Mm-hmm. And I'm still trying to finish the English translation of this biography.
Mm-hmm. So your take on Golda Meir was more like a family friend or a political scientist or somewhere in between?
I would say political scientist, but I could not escape the fact that I knew the subject of my biography, but I tried to retain a sort of a scientific detachment from the subject and try to point out the positive, the negative, the achievements, the failures, the problematic sides of her personality, the positive sides of her personality, because she was an amazing woman. She could be charming, she could be a wonderful person. On the other hand, she could be tough, she could be stubborn, she could be mean, she could be petty. Mm-hmm. And I suppose this is what made her a fascinating subject for a biography.
Mm-hmm. So let's focus about really her personality and also her journey to prominence, because she was really in the top leadership of the Zionist movement and then of the State of Israel. She was an outsider. First of all, she was a Westerner. She was from America, even though she was born in Eastern Europe. But still, her coming of age was in the West. And, of course, the fact that she was a woman, almost the single woman in many decision-making forums all throughout the years. How did she make it to the very top? What was it in her that took her to the very top? Was it just ambition?
It was a combination of ambition, determination, stubbornness, a realization that she is going to advance herself as the Jewish people and her labor movement and the Zionist movement and socialism and labor socialism all put together. She was going to be part of laying the foundations for a future Jewish state, which she hoped would be basically socialist, progressive, there will be equality, there will be justice, it will be a progressive country. She was determined that she was not going to remain an average, normal American Jewish girl at the beginning of the 20th century, ending up either marrying or getting a job as a sales girl in Gimbel's or Macy's, or being a teacher, or being involved in sewing. She was going to make something out of herself.
Mm-hmm. How did she become enamored with the idea of Zionism in the first place? How did she? What was it in her that made her such an ideological personality? You know, thinking about Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the early 20th century, it was very unusual.
She was very much influenced by her older sister, Shana, who introduced her to Zionism, to socialism. She then realized, living or growing up, as it were, in the Jewish ghetto of Milwaukee, she was very sensitive to injustices, to poverty, to inequality. And she was determined that all this in a future Jewish state should be changed completely. And this is what she attempted to do most of her life.
Mm-hmm. And how was it received in her immediate surroundings?
Very negatively. Her family, and especially her husband, felt that this was all nonsense, in Yiddish Narrischkeit. They did not encourage her. On the contrary, they discouraged her. They were very unhappy when she decided to leave America, to go to then Palestine, not only go to Palestine, but also to join a kvutza, a kibbutz. And they felt that she was throwing her life away. But she spent her years trying to prove them wrong. I suspect she succeeded in doing that.
Mm-hmm. Was the fact that she was a woman, was it only an obstacle, or did it play in her favor as well?
No, it was a major obstacle. In those days when the issue of gender and so on was not yet a major issue, it was a major problem, because the key question was who's going to look after children. And as it were, it was either party, movement, ideology, or family. And she opted for party, and therefore the party became really her home.
Mm-hmm. Did she ever regret that? Did she ever think that she abandoned her family?
I suppose she did.
She never talked about it, though.
2 or 3 interviews towards the end of her life, she mentioned that maybe she sacrificed family life for her views and for her ideology and for her ambitions. But by and large, she was convinced she was doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. And what was it in her that took her to that place where she was really in the same room, almost on par with Ben Gurion and Moshe Sharet, and really the leaders of Zionism at the time?
She was a very impressive personality. She was obstinate. She knew what she was talking about. She had enormous ability to convince people. She was at her best on one-on-one. She was not a great reader. She was not a great writer. She did not contribute much to Zionist or socialist ideology. But there was a passion there. There was a determination, and above all, this idea that we could make things different. We could change the world. We could change the course, the future of the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. And this is something that she did, and with some very impressive results.
And then she rose to become the first female prime minister of Israel. I think even the first female prime minister to be elected in democratic elections.
No, I think Indira Gandhi preceded her. There was somebody else. I forget who it was. I think she was the third. She became prime minister before Margaret Thatcher.
Yes, 10 years before Margaret Thatcher even. So
you're right.
Yeah.
Thatcher became
so it was really unusual at the time. The circumstances of her coming to power were the death of Levi Eshkol, the sudden death of
No, it wasn't
Eshkol.
sudden. The man was sick for 4 years before he died. He had his first heart attack in the fall of 1965. And apparently later on he also had cancer. He was a dying man. And he would,
And people knew that? Was it out in the open?
the insiders,
Mm-hmm.
people, the leadership knew it very
Mm-hmm.
well. And he did not die suddenly. It was expected. She was informed in the summer of 1967 that Eshkol was sick and she's going to prepare herself for the position, which she did.
So she was the designated prime minister in waiting of the Labour Party at the time?
Absolutely. And basically because there was nobody else. She was the senior. She was the oldest. She was a compromise. The party wanted to avoid a major clash between Dayan and Alon, who in terms of age were probably more appropriate for the job. But the elders of the party said, let's go with Golda. We know what we have. She's been with us for 50 years, and she would be the best.
That might have turned out to be a mistake, really, because they appointed this, I wouldn't say dinosaur, but, a member of the old guard, and the consequences of that, perhaps not direct consequences, but were really the decline of the Mapai rule.
I am not sure. The decline of Mapai rule began at the end of the Ben-Gurion era.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, we thought this was the best choice. I'll give you two examples. The first is there was a poll taken at the beginning of 1969, who is best fit to be prime minister. Golda got 3% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
6 weeks after she became prime minister, she got 80% of the vote.
Uh-huh.
It just goes to show you. The other is a letter I found written by Yoni Netanyahu to his family, in which he wrote, how do you like our new prime minister? Finally, we've got someone who knows what he's doing and can make decisions. And that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
See, and there was a young colonel in the army who was very impressed with Golda, and so were quite a few people.
And he came from the opposite camp, of course.
Not at the time. His father was a revisionist. I'm not sure what were Yoni's ideological roots. I'm not sure to this very day.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Would you say that really this tough character, and that has sometimes been interpreted as intransigence, diplomatic intransigence, was something that really marked her leadership, or was it some kind of an erroneous depiction in hindsight?
I wouldn't call it intransigence. I would say she became prime minister at the age of 71. At this age, you don't change. Rarely do you have major leaders who make historic decisions when they're 70s. Rabin, Adenauer, De Gaulle, Mao, Deng Xiaoping. Apart from that, very difficult to make changes. The key tragedy was that she did not want to make any experiments. In this respect, she reminds me of Shamir. Unlike Begin, who was prepared to make experiments, maybe even Sharon, maybe Rabin also wanted, prepared to make experiments. She didn't want to take any gamble. And therefore she seemed to be intransigent, an image, by the way, which she did not bother to change. Maybe she was even proud of it.
So you think that talking about her as really the standard bearer of Israeli intransigence is unfair?
It is unfair. Her major problem was her inability to connect with the younger generation of Israel. There was a total disconnect between them. She harked back to the early years, to the 20s, pioneering kibbutz, moshav, farming and so on. And modern, younger Israelis wanted a totally different life, fulfill themselves. The good life, the travel, the cars, the consumer society. She didn't understand that this is a totally different Israel. And I don't think she could ever understand it, given the age gap and given a total different Israel.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the most high-profile part of her heritage was the Yom Kippur War of 1973.
Well, it wasn't her heritage.
Unfortunately, that's how it turned out, that she's best remembered for the big failure.
Something she did not anticipate, something that she didn't forgive herself. On the other hand, as one who watched her virtually every day in those terrible days, we were lucky that she was Prime Minister.
Why do you say that?
Because she took some of the most important decisions. It turned out that she understood the strategic considerations, the military considerations. She was open to ideas. She consulted. She held the contacts with the United States. He was very much involved in getting American military support, and she was probably the first to understand that a change has taken place. For example, Egypt was prepared to talk, but she also realized that her time was up, and that having...
only after the war she realized that?
I think she realized it on day 2, that she would have to go, but... her feeling was, let's win the war and then we'll see what happens.
But did you feel all that in real time? You were a young man at the time. Did you think that she was really out of touch with the younger generation?
Yes, absolutely. And I covered, I attended many of her meetings with young people, with students and others. You could see the disconnect. In some respects, she reminded me of Ben Gurion in the 50s, when he also lost contact with young Israelis. He was talking about the Negev and pioneering and Hityashvut and settlement and so on. And they said, what's he talking about? What does he want from us? In this respect, she reminded me of Ben Gurion. But I would say, above all, a fascinating woman.
Yeah. Well, what is really the fondest memory that you have of her?
The caring. The interest in people. She could never be alone. She always wanted people around her. Very curious. She loved gossip. Watching television, news on television with Golda was an experience, because there was always a response. Who does he think he is? What is he talking about? He's an idiot, and all that.
She didn't mince words.
No. She told us exactly what it was. She could be, I mentioned, she could be mean, she could be petty, but she could be magnanimous, she could be a wonderful human being. And above all, fascinating personality.
Tell us a bit briefly, because we have to wrap up soon, about the relationship of your mother with her.
My mother grew up with Golda, immigrated with Golda, together, same group. Kept in touch with Golda throughout the years, helped Golda in many ways.
Was she a fan of hers?
And she was a fan of Golda. On many occasions, when Golda was Prime Minister. I remember 10 o'clock at night, Golda would phone my mother, Regina, what you doing? Come over. Let's have a chat. She knew, above all, that she could trust my mother. She could tell her inner stories. Her dilemmas, family problems, so on. She knew nothing would leak out, and nothing leaked out.
Did your mother know that she'd be Prime Minister of Israel?
My mother had a feeling that Golda would end up as Prime Minister of Israel, yes.
All right. Professor Meron Medzini of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, biographer of Golda Meir, thank you very much for this interview.
My pleasure.